Hello, class. Welcome to our lesson for today. We're actually looking at the book today in section 1.1. So if you want to turn to that as we're going through things, I try to correlate some things with the examples there, or at least talk about them in some more detail. So again, you want to know where your math book is at this point. Make sure that you can access that online, if nothing else. So let's go ahead and get started here. Today we're looking at integers and absolute value. Those are two topics that you're going to want to make sure that you understand. For our first question, I'm going to try to have some just warm-up pieces where we discuss some things and make sure we know what we're looking at. This question is comparing numbers. Okay, so remember that the less than greater than symbols, I made notes about what they are. A lot of people can write them, but they can't say which one they are. So make sure you know less than kind of is the smaller to the larger, and greater than kind of the larger to the smaller. And then you should be able to compare these pieces in order to figure out what's less than or greater than. So what would probably be a good idea is if you look at some of these and can kind of mentally or write them down. You could even pause the video if you wanted to be able to find all of 6 of these answers to figure out which number is less than or greater than in some cases compared to the other. So here's all 6 answers to this question. Obviously, some of them are easier than others. For example, number 1 should be really easy. 12 is obviously less than 14. Same thing with number 2. If one number is positive and one number is negative, like number 5 here, number 6, that should be fairly obvious because the positive numbers are bigger than negatives. The ones that are typically the hardest is the fact that, like this one, -2 is actually larger than -5, and that seems kind of odd. But the idea is on a number line, a number closer to 0 is actually better for you than a number further away from 0 in the negatives. And that's where the integer ideas kind of come into play. Another way to think about it is if you owe people money, let's say you owe someone $2 or you owe someone $5. Which one's a better situation if you owe them money? It's the $2 because you only owe them 2. So the -2 is actually higher than -5. And that's kind of a backwards mindset. So you want to make sure you're thinking about that as we look at integers. Okay, speaking of integers, what are integers? They're kind of like counting numbers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. But there's also the negatives, so like -1, -2, -3. And if you look at this number line right here, that's kind of what we're looking at. But then don't forget there's this 0 thing, okay, that's kind of in between the negatives and positives. So something to keep track of as you're looking at those scenarios. I always like to say that 0 is like Switzerland. Now, some of you are saying, what is Mr. Rendell talking about? That makes 0 sense. Others of you are saying, oh yeah, I get it. The reason that I say 0 is a lot like Switzerland is if I say, is 0 a positive integer, some people say, yeah, it's positive. And if I say, is 0 a negative integer, some people would say, yeah, it's negative because I can put a negative sign in front of it. Some people say, oh, it's both. I like to think of 0 as a neutral integer. Okay, and the reason I put Switzerland is here's Switzerland, right here in the middle here of Europe. And in World War II, Switzerland was what it was known as a neutral country. They didn't take a side in World War II, for example. That's kind of amazing considering here's Germany, here's Italy, here's France, here's the United Kingdom, here's Poland. Like, here's all of these countries involved, the Czech Republic, for example. Okay, Austria, Hungary, okay, Russia's obviously over here. Look at this. How did Switzerland stay neutral? Well, there's probably more reasons, but one reason is geographically it's a lot of mountainous area and it would have been difficult to take over. And what's the benefit necessarily? So there may have been something else to it than just they're neutral to leave them alone. But the idea of 0 being neutral is the same as Switzerland. Okay, graphing questions. When you graph on a number line, one thing I want to talk about is you don't have to make the sides from 0 even. For example, you may have been told in the past, oh, if you go 7 to one way, you have to go 7 the other way. I don't know if that's going to be necessary at all times from now on. The key is consistency. You don't want to go -1, -2, -5. Okay, you want to make sure you go by ones or you're going by tens, whatever you're going to do, and just make sure that it's legible as you're looking at those situations. And the order from least to greatest could be found from the number line. Obviously, the number line doesn't have to be used in order to find the answer, but you could use it in order to figure out the order from least to greatest. Notice the biggest negative, or the most negative, is the smallest number that you deal with. Okay, the next question just talks about something with speed and velocity. I just want to talk about that because there's a few things in your book that talk about speed. So what's happening here is that each second, this person is wearing a parachute and coming to the ground. So after each second, what you should notice is that the height is going down by 15. So the pattern in the table is it's going down 15 feet. Remember, the one tick mark is feet each second. The integer that represents speed is 15 feet per second, because speed doesn't care which way you're going. Think about a car. It doesn't matter if you're going left or right or north or south, east or west. You just say, I'm going 50 miles an hour. Okay, so speed doesn't matter which is positive and which is negative. Velocity, on the other hand, is 15 feet per second, but it adds a negative. That negative says, oh, by the way, I'm going down 15 feet per second. If it was positive, I'd be going up 15 feet a second. Similarly, on a number line, left and right, to the right is positive and to the left is negative. That's the exact same idea. So when you're looking at these situations, that's something that you want to make sure that you understand. The other thing is that the units, so things like speed and velocity have this feet per second. It's a number per something else. And so when you're dealing with that scenario, that's something that you want to think about as you're looking at it. And so the idea of speed is a version kind of absolute value. Now, some of you have learned absolute value is distance, or I'm sorry, not distance, it is just a positive, or just switches the number. I want to make sure we're clear about what absolute value actually means. I kind of spoiled it already. Absolute value is the distance away from zero. It is denoted with these two bars like this. Okay, so when you're handwriting this, you want to make sure it's obvious. I try to make mine obvious so that you don't think they're ones. In print, it's easier to spot. Okay, so absolute value, and then absolute value of -3, for example, is 3 because it's 3 away from 0. The downfall is some people will say the absolute value of 4 will be -4 because they think, oh, it just flip-flops negative, positive. Well, 4 is still 4 away from 0, so you don't have to worry about the idea of that negative piece on the positives either. So absolute value, by definition, is distance away from 0. So these questions should all go really quick. Essentially, what many of you know is like, oh, that's just positive 15, etc., etc. Like this one here is just going to be positive 35. Here's all the answers. They should just become positive, but the rule is that it's distance away from 0 for absolute value, and the byproduct of that is they end up being positive. The one I really want to bring to your attention is number 6, the absolute value of 0. The absolute value of 0 is 0 because 0 is 0 away. You're already there. You're saying like, how far away am I from school? You're at school. Oh, okay. Well, I'm 0 away. That's what that's saying. Okay. You'll notice the directions on this question are going to be similar to some things I ask you to do on your homework. When you have questions in the book that ask you to find less than, greater than, or find an answer, I want you to copy and complete things like this. Now, I'm not saying you have to write down entire word problems, but you do need to write down some of these things. So if I was looking at this question, I should have on my paper -4, less than, and then absolute value of 5, because the absolute value of -5 is 5. You'll notice these two are the same because the absolute values are both 6. Some people might think this bottom right one is the same, but you'll notice that the negative sign is outside the absolute value. So you have to treat kind of absolute value like a special set of parentheses. So you have to do that first. So the absolute value of 3 is 3, and then make it negative. So -3 is smaller because it's a negative number compared to positive 3. Ordering from least to greatest. Online and things like this, probably it's just a move and drop and make sure they're in the right order. When you're doing things by hand, try to have things set up in a way that makes sense. So when you're looking at these numbers, you want to make sure that you have the order correct. The other thing that might be helpful on these questions is to make sure that when you find the answers that you understand that this piece here is the same as 10. When you try to write the answers, try to put them in original format because that'll help when you do some assessment pieces. So work on that piece as well as you're ordering from least to greatest. Okay, first book assignment. Okay, what you'll notice here is that I assigned all odds today. There may be a mix and match depending on the situation and the questions, but you want to get into the habit of writing the original question down on non-word problems. So many of you have done this in previous classes and you had to write all these things down. I'm talking about these shorter questions like find the absolute value of 7. You should put absolute value of 7 equals 7. It's going to be hard for me to police that right now because I'm not checking necessarily all your work. But I think it's going to be good in the future because eventually you're going to need that work anyway. You should always check your answers in the back of the book, just like we did on the worksheets before. And then the next class period, there should be some preparation on your end to say, I don't get number 17 or I don't get number 21. So make sure that you do that. Okay, make sure you know where your book's at, or you could use the ebook, and make sure you write all your work down on a piece of paper. What I don't want to see is just the answers. That's not helpful, okay, to me. So you need some work shown about what happened and how to explain it. Have a good day, everybody.